Today in our 52 questions series, we respond to the Muslim claim that Muhammad is mentioned in the Bible. First of all, let's define a prophet of God. Real prophets are called directly by God. He equips them and sends them to carry out specific tasks. Muslims are convinced that Muhammad's name and coming were predicted in the Bible, but obscured by deliberate corruption of the text by Christians. We read this in Surah 61, Ayat 6. Now, if you have not already listened to our two-part video titled Has the Bible Been Changed? We encourage you to do so. It will help you to understand why we can be sure that God has protected His word. The question is, on which biblical texts do Muslims base such claims? We will examine the first of two passages below. Deuteronomy chapter 18 verses 15 to 19. This is a key text for Muslims. Speaking to the tribes of Israel before he died, Moses said that God would raise up another prophet like me from among the Jews. Moses was like Jesus in several ways. Number 1, he was spared death as a baby. Number 2, he renounced a royal court. Number 3, he had compassion on his people. Number 4, he made intercession for the people. Number 5, he spoke with God face to face. No wonder the Jews rejected Muhammad. Number 6, he was a mediator of a covenant. Number 7, he performed miracles. Yet by his own admission, Muhammad performed no miracles, and we know this from Surah 6, Ayat 50, and Surah 29, Ayat 50. Note also that the prophet whom God would raise up would be a Jew. And we know that Jesus Christ was in fact a Jew. Yet as far as we know, Muhammad was from Arabia and not a Jew. Nor are the Arabs one of the 12 tribes of Israel. Moses specifically says in verse 15 that this prophet would come from your brothers. This is obviously a direct reference to the descendants of the patriarch Jacob. Muslims claim to be descendants of Ishmael. Whatever the truth of their claim, God is very clear in His word that His promised blessing of the Messiah would come from Isaac, not Ishmael. We read this in Genesis chapter 17, verses 19 to 21. Both the Old and New Testaments interpret Deuteronomy 18 as a reference to the coming Messiah. For example, during one of Peter's first sermons as recorded in the New Testament, the Injil, Peter tells us that the promised prophet from Deuteronomy 18 was Christ. We read this in Acts chapter 3 and Acts chapter 7. And Stephen, the first Christian martyr, gave testimony before the Sanhedrin that Jesus was the long-awaited prophet foretold by Moses. Please see Acts chapter 7 for this. All Muslims believe that Moses was a great prophet, and they believe in his writings and message. However, they appear to have overlooked the message of Jesus when he said this: "For if you believed Moses, you would believe me, for he wrote of me. But if you do not believe his writings, how will you believe my words?" We read this in John chapter 5, verses 46 and 47. And what is Jesus' core message? Well, it is found in John chapter 8, verse 24, where Jesus says this: "I told you that you would die in your sins, for unless you believe that I am He, you will die in your sins." And it was also prophesied in the Old Testament that Jesus would be born in Bethlehem. We read this in Micah chapter 5, verse 2. And Jesus was indeed born in Bethlehem. Meantime, Muhammad was born in Mecca, Arabia. Dear listener, we previously dealt with the question of whether Christians and Muslims worship the same God in our video, The Character of God versus the Character of Allah. We encourage you to watch this. The prophecy of Deuteronomy 18 was clearly fulfilled in Jesus Christ centuries before Muhammad was born. The prophecy does not fit Muhammad, who spoke on behalf of the Islamic God Allah, and not on behalf of Yahweh, the God of the Bible. Therefore, Mohammed can be firmly ruled out as a possible fulfilment of the prophecy in this passage. Join us next time when we conclude our evidence for why we can be certain that Mohammed is not mentioned in the Bible, as we look at John chapter 14 and the promised Comforter.